Hi everyone, and welcome to a real-time coloring video of this Lil Angel by Make It Crafty. And today we're going to talk about how to color red hair and actually how to color her hair in very nice detail. If you want to see how I put this card together and how I did the technique with the pattern paper in the background, there will be a link in the description down below, up on the right corner and at the end of this video. So you can go there and check that out, maybe after. But now is the real-time coloring. So as I said, this is Lil Angel by Make It Crafty. I have colored her before, but then I went for a very light color scheme with a platinum blonde hair, with slightly just using very light grays to color her dress and wings. And I wanted to show you that you can do whatever you want with your angels. So I'm starting off here and I'm gonna give her red hair because she has those really cute freckles on her nose, and freckles for me really say red hair, even though I have freckles and I don't have red hair. My natural color is some kind of ashen brown. I think we usually call it mouse. But right now I'm pink because I kind of like the pink. Anyhow, let's get started on this. So I'm starting off by actually just coloring with my YR21, just adding that first layer of color. I thought I was going to use this as my highlights, but I kind of, when I had started coloring on top of this, I felt that this would be way too light, and even doubled it would probably still be too light. So I decided to not use the YR21. Instead, I would make my color blending a little bit less. I had picked out 5 colors for this and I ended up using 4. However, this basing the image actually gives you a little bit of a simpler blend, so it's a good thing. You can color directly without basing an image. I do that a lot. However, it is harder to blend those darker colors if you want them to be blended. And basing it out like this, you already have some pigment seeped down into the paper. But also, one of the things that really makes it a little bit easier is that it can be hard to figure out how dark and how much of the dark that you are going to get with the other with your deepest color before you add this, because you have just white to kind of base your color from. So having this little bit of lighter pen makes it a little bit easier actually. I'm starting off with my E18, and for my first layer I actually decided to just add the E18, the darkest color, just behind her. The idea is to actually build up, make it look like this hair is hanging behind her while the other hair is in front of her. So kind of give the illusion of depth. So I started off by making make it pretty dark, really dark. I can tell you there were numerous places when I did this that I wasn't sure that this was going to be anything that I wanted to share, but by layering a couple of layers it ended up being something I kind of really liked. So that's a tip. Also, I think it's here I start with it, we'll see. Yes, as you can see, those waves in front of her face only go down to her shoulder, and I wanted to really define her hair just so that you had those kind of 2 separate pieces. You had the hair in the background and you had the hair in the front. So I added extra kind of loops in those pieces, just to make that slightly more dimensional, make it look a little bit more. Otherwise I would have to blend a little bit between the kind of frontal hair and the back hair, and I didn't know if that would be looks the way I wanted it to look. So I was really happy how it came out in the end. But yeah, it looks kind of messy here, but that's how it looks sometimes. I think that is something I learned after a couple of years, was that after when I started out, every layer I did had to be perfect. And then after a couple of years, I started figuring out what I could do and what I couldn't do, how to fix things, and I actually started to be a lot messier in my coloring. It goes a little bit faster, it looks a little bit messier, but after a couple of layers, no one will be the wiser. However, you will, because you will get to see the whole process. So yeah, that's the thing. After going in with the E18, I went in with the E08. Now, there's a couple of E's that you could choose to kind of build up. You can use the E18, maybe lay in E09 first before you go to E08, or go in with the E07. All of these colors are really fun to mix with oranges, because they do have a very red and orange undertone, but more towards the brown spectrum. And by mixing them together with the orange, you get this auburn hair. Is it called auburn? Or is that a purple? A very red hair anyhow. More chestnut maybe. I don't know. My English color words aren't the best today. Anyhow, I just make here also you can see, very specifically see, that I'm not making strands. I'm more working with clumps of hair, and that is because when you look at a photo, you look at anything and you kind of squeeze your eyes a little bit and look at that image, you will not see the separate strands, you will more see the tuft. And when you are coloring a image like this, you really want to go for those tuft, because it's already simplified in the line art and the lines overall. So you want this simplicity to kind of wander in to your image. Now, with that said, you do you. I don't know, sometimes I feel that kind of words can be, people can think that you are rude, but I don't mean it in any rude way. I mean, if you enjoy coloring the way you are coloring, then color the way you are coloring. When I started coloring, I did that. I learned a lot from different YouTubes, from watching reading other people's blog, looking at their images, looking on how did they put the shadows on their images, how did they build up, how much depth, how much color, here and there and here and there. I did that all the time, and I learned so much from them. And now, when I've done this for so many years, I want to share my knowledge back to you, and maybe you can learn something from it. However, I'm very, very adamant to say that my techniques are the techniques I use. If you are comfortable using another technique and you get the results that you want from that technique, then stay with that technique. I'm not telling you to change or to color differently or think differently. I'm just giving you choices. And I want to be very, very clear about that, because I have loved different ways of coloring throughout these years. I had a period when everything was very stranded hair, very line, and some images I still do stranded hair images that fits a little bit better for it, but mostly I do this kind of more clumps because I like how it looks, how it reflects. And as you can have seen throughout when I did my kind of top layer with the YR18, whenever I went outside the line, I came in with my colorless blender and kind of tried to push that ink back towards the red. And when it comes to the colorless blender, when you are using it on white cardstock, just pure white cardstock, if you're going to color on top of it, let it dry in between. That's the only thing I have, because if you go over it while it's still wet, it will actually move the pigments that you have in that color, and you will not get the same results as at the rest of the image. But if you let it dry before you go over it, it is so wonderful to use as a sort of eraser. But you don't want to have multiple layers that you try to erase, or big pieces that you try to erase, because what you do is push the pigment into the paper, or as I do, I try to move it both into the paper and in where the rest of the red is, so I'm kind of pushing towards it with my nib. So that's a tip. You can get really cool effects by using the blender pen on top of other colors, but that is more a technique than actually a use of it. You can't use it to blend two different pens, because that is not what it's used for, even though it's called a blender pen. But it's called a blender pen because it's filled with the blending solution for the Copics. So yeah, after doing my first layer here, I chose to go in again with the E18, and this just to kind of deepen some shadows here and there, and adding a little bit of shadows here and there, just to give that extra dimension in all of these tufts to make them stand out a little bit. I felt like the brown behind her were like a little dark sea, and by adding the same color but just teeny tiny as kind of folds in her hair, I moved, or I kind of made that darkness not so sea-like behind her, and look a little bit more like a part of the hair. And after that I go in with the E08, and what I do is I first blend those dark lines where these kind of folds or overlapping of hair is. And if you look at someone with long hair, you will see wherever the different tufts of hair overlaps, you get it a little bit of a darker tone, and wherever they are very much towards the sun, you will get the highlights. And that is kind of what I'm trying to mimic here in a very kind of stylized fashion. And again, by doing the second layer, again I'm messing the image up, but after I have gone in with all the colors, it will kind of be more even, and that is kind of the magic of that top layer with the last with a highlight pen. It will make the colors kind of flow together just slightly, and they will just, the hair will look great. My second layer is usually a much more lazy. I'm not as detail oriented. I'm not looking for perfection at all. I'm just looking for adding a little bit of extra color in those places where I feel that it is missing. So in this case, just where I wanted the colors to blend. And then I have the last layer, which is the YR15, which is the my lightest color, my highlight color. This is called Pumpkin, and I love it. It's one of my favorite oranges, actually. I'm not a super fan of super bright orange, and I'm not a super fan of yellow. I told you that a couple of times. But the YR15 is kind of a muted orange, and when I do her hair, it kind of makes, it helps create that fall-like brownish reddish tone that I just completely love. It is my absolute favorite hair color to color, because also they work so well together, so you get so much details and so much depth into the image when you use these colors. And I'm not super careful either when I'm doing this. I'm doing pretty simple because I was just filling it in. And to finish that off, I go around the image, and as you see, when I do this small kind of circle motions, pushing the nib towards the hair, so that I can kind of remove those extra colors outside the lines. Sometimes you have to go several times over a line to get it, and I usually not try to do it perfectly. I just try to get as much as possible that is simple to get off. Just simple. And when I'm finished with this, it's time for the Gloria. I think it's called the Gloria. I started off using the Y20s that I've used for the golden details on all the dresses, on the glittery princess and the royal wizard. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, those were my 2 latest card tutorials, and you can find them on my YouTube channel. So I added those, and I felt like, yeah, this isn't really working. It's way too dull. It doesn't look as sparky as her hair. So I chose a green with the Y02 on top of that, and Y02 is a really bright yellow, and with that Y20 on the bottom, it kind of came to some nice middle, making it look pretty nice. I kind of like that. And you shouldn't be afraid of actually when you feel like, oh, this went too gray or this went too bright, to go in, look, do I have a tone on tone when it comes to the lightness of my lightest color? Do I have something in that range that is either a little bit more muted than you needed, or than you have, or a little bit brighter than you already have colored, and then add that on top and see what happens. One of my first real coping coloring that I was really proud of was my first time around getting Copics. I got like 40 Copics. I put them away and bought Spectrum Noirs because I wasn't sure. And I wasn't sure because I bought the wrong colors. I talked about this before. But one of the first images I did was a card for my grandfather. And I think I have it on my blog, like 2011, 2012, something like that. And that card, I did a Magnolia character, and I wanted it all to be muted, and I didn't really have a muted tone. So I actually went in and I based my whole image. I don't think I based the skin color, but I think I based everything else on that image with a YR31 as my kind of base color. And then I added pinks and greens on top of those, I had the red 90s, I think it is, 91, 93, 95 as my pinks, and then with that yellow layer underneath. And then I used my I think it was the G40 or the G20, the G24 and the G46, I think it was. Those were the colors that I had, because I only had a few Copics when I started. And I did those on top of the Y31, and it gave it this kind of old vintage feeling, and I ended up matching it perfectly to the paper that I was using, and it was a really nice card for my grandfather, and he really liked it. So yeah, I do recommend playing around with layering different colors. So while I've been talking about that, I have been doing the skin color. The skin color I'm using here is my go-to skin color, mostly because redheads have a very fair skin, and so I thought that would be good. However, when I colored her the first layer, I felt I did not get the dimension that I wanted in the places I wanted. By the way, I colored that nose terrible. I know that. She doesn't look... Her nose is... Yeah, I didn't like it. But I like the rest of the image, so she got to have a very strange nose. Almost a very tacky mustache. But yeah, sometimes. So, as I felt I didn't get the dimension I wanted, I just went in and made a second layer with my Copics. So I went in, I did the Y04, Y11, Y21, again, kind of spreading the colors a little bit, kind of adding a little bit more dimension where I wanted, rounding off her face, rounding off her legs, because I did forget the E00 the first time on her legs, giving her some kind of eyelids, a little bit of eyelids. I actually correct those eyelids a little bit with my pen later, just adding a little bit of pencil in the corners. You're gonna see that at the end of the video, to get those eyelids to fit her a little bit better. And for a little final touch on her eye, I just go in with B37 just in the middle of the eye. That's it. Nothing more, because I thought that was the simplest. And her wings, I used some neutral grays for her wings. I did go a little bit overboard with the darkest, the N4 on these wings. I could probably have just been a lot more light-handed with it, still getting the same dimension. So they're a little bit darker than I would want them to be, but yeah, sometimes you have to roll with it. I think that is also one of the things I've learned after so many years of coloring with my Copics is it doesn't have to be perfect all the time. I can have them as learning. Some parts of the images can always be a learning thing. I don't have to be perfect all the time. But, and that's a good thing to think about in the rest of your life also, actually. But for her dress, I'm using some YG05, and I'm covering the whole dress again like I did with the hair. And this is because this specific color combination, the YR05 is a little bit too light, but the YR07 is a little bit too dark. So instead I base the whole image with YR05, and then I'm gonna color over the highlights with it again, getting a dual layer of that tone where the highlights are, and therefore getting the color combination to work a little bit better. Then I go in with the G21. I looked here like, do I need something more? Do I need something more? Yes, I do. I usually cut these pieces out. Sometimes I miss them, which I did this time. But I think a little bit, and then I add some color. So this time I added a little bit of shadow. As you can see, I left that little bit of ring light or rim light or reflective light on her sleeves and like on her arms. And the reason for doing that little bit of a light at the bottom of her sleeves is to make them stand out from the bottom of or from the dress. So if I had colored the shadow all the way down to the edge of her sleeves, they will kind of melt into the dress and the shadow that is under the dress. So that is why I decided to add that little bit of coloring there. And then I'm going to go in with the YG09, and as you see, I actually cover almost the complete dress with that color. I started with the G09 and then the YG09, and then I'm adding just the rim lights, just the very streaky highlights will get the YG05, so that it kind of just gives it a little bit of extra but still have a pretty nice green actually. And for the last kind of step for the coloring, I'm going in with a brown polychromos pencil. This pencil is very sharp. I have sharpened it very sharp, and then I'm just doing super teeny tiny circles with it to add those little dots. Sometimes I just push it down, but with a pencil it doesn't always give that color that I want. I was going crazy here and had to stop myself. I was almost starting to actually give her freckles on her legs also, but I stopped myself. Left her have just a lot of them in her face instead. And then I added that little triangle in the corner on the eyes just to get those eyelids to work a little bit better with her. And that was the coloring for today. I hope you liked it. If you did, please thumbs it up. It means a lot to me. If you have any questions, just comment down below. And if you want to see more videos like this, just hit that subscribe button if you haven't already done that. I want to say thank you again for watching, and I will see you later. Bye!